There we go. Good morning, Mr. Modular. How you doing?
Hello. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Uh, my name is Waldo, just in case anybody doesn't know or anybody's paying attention. I'm gonna get chat loaded real quick. Uh, how's that Vampire Survivor run going?
It's going. I'm almost there. But I can just pause it.
No, no, no. Keep going. I got a minute to get my thing going
Oh,
anyway.
all right.
Um, how far along in the game are you?
27 minutes.
27. You're getting there. Which map?
Yep. It is the third map. I don't know what it's called.
Ah, okay. All right. I've got chat up in the corner. Testing it out, and it works. Fantastic. Um, which character are you using?
Um,
Stinky Ballsack guy?
no, no. The um the one with the thing that ricochets on the map.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Because Stinky Ballsack old man is a noob trap. He can't
Yeah.
survive. He can't survive past like 15, 20 minutes, you know?
I've actually cleared the entire game with him.
Oh, yeah?
Like all of my available maps. Yeah. Stinky ball sack gets pretty powerful
It
sometimes.
it can, yeah, if you thing, but I uh, honestly, what do I usually go with? I usually go with water, lightning, and the holy water and the lightning always, and then I end up taking the fireball just because I want the garlic. I mean the spinach anyway.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the garlic and Bible combo,
Hmm.
and then running like the Thousand Knives and sometimes lightning, but usually the what do you call it? It's the magic wand,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
the upgraded version of that.
yeah, yeah. Because if you have the book that upgrades the magic wand, everything fires off faster.
Exactly.
And the knives are good for deleting bosses. Uh, so I'm just gonna tell the viewers what I told you a minute ago. That bad news. Mr. George Santos will not be here today for this stream. He has lied again.
Incredible.
I expected him here. I spoke to him earlier in the week, and he told me he would be here. And then he had a children's birthday party to go to, and I don't know if he's just invited or he's like performing. I don't know. If he's performing, then maybe I don't know. But another lie from George Santos. Um, he has assured me that we can speak this evening, but I don't know if I believe him.
Mm.
I'm gonna try get with him again this evening, and I don't think I'll live stream. I think I'll just make it a video, then edit out any of his most egregious lies, or maybe I'll just leave him in. I'm not sure.
He's a slippery guy,
He's
that
slippery.
George Santos.
That's true. He is slippery. And I think, what have I got on the list today? Some George Santos stuff, some Ron DeSantis junk, then good old MTG.
MTG.
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Oh, I was thinking Magic the
I
Gathering.
know. We need
I
a
was
better
like, oh God,
we need a
what has
better
happened?
name for her. What if we call her Maytag? That won't confuse anything.
Then I'll just think of refrigerators.
I know.
There's so much shit on my screen right now. It's ridiculous.
It gets that way. I streamed it last week and it started chugging. Like the seconds last longer if you've got an older computer. Each second actually isn't tied to the clock. So if your game chugs and slows down, the timer slows down.
Wow. No, my computer can handle it.
Yeah, mine
It's just
usually does. There was just that one time where I was like I was streaming it to our Discord server, and like somebody was watching, and then I was sharing the screen, and then I had all the effects going all at once, and it just chugged down, and each second took about 3 seconds. It was like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Then it would click over 1 second, and I was like, wow, okay.
Jeez.
Other than that, pretty good week, pretty chill, nothing to worry about.
Yep, I got my headache that I've had for the last 5 months out of the way. It was great.
Oh, you got it out of the way. You
Yep.
took care of it early, so it'll be done.
Well,
It's good
it's
scheduling on your
it's
part.
something I couldn't control the scheduling of,
Oh,
but
okay.
you know,
I was thinking that you'd scheduled it. Like, hey, I scheduled my sickness for next week. I'm gonna have the flu on Thursday, and that
oh
is
no, I mean
just the way I'm
headache
gonna
at
do it.
work.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. I like this better. I like this. I'm inventing a new headcanon for you. You just schedule all your
I
illnesses.
schedule my
hmm
illnesses, yeah.
hmm Can't be there on Friday. I'm going to have COVID on Friday, but I should be back up by Monday.
Perfect.
Have you ever got COVID?
I have.
Okay, I was just curious.
It cost me my sense of smell for over a year.
Really? Okay, yeah.
Yep.
Um, is that before or after the Fauci ouchie, the the Fauci ouchie, the deadly jab?
That would have been, let's see, I got it in 2021, so before.
Okay, okay.
And then I still had to get the jab.
hmm yeah, I was the very first when it was still kind of experimental. They were like, "Hey, we're looking for volunteers," and I volunteered.
Nice.
So I got mine real early because I was like, "Hey, we can finally be done with all this mask junk, right?" And kind of were, but so I had to keep going for a while. But um, and then I actually caught it probably 4 or 5 months ago. Um, we were just out in town, and I got home that day, and I was exhausted. And I was like, man, we ran around town, and I'm real tired. But uh, then, like, it didn't go away after sitting down and resting for a few minutes. I was like, oh no, I think I got it. Then we tested the next morning and definitely had it. Everybody. We went to a very populated part of the city, caught it, spread it,
Sucks.
and then
I didn't do anything to deserve it.
yeah, I definitely went to population center. Had a good day in the big day in the city. And then my whole family caught it, and then and then it wasn't that bad for me. I just I'd never been so exhausted like that before. And then
Yeah,
and then my knees hurt for some stupid reason. I couldn't understand why, but
oh, that's just the old man arthritis.
it might be. But they don't
Yeah,
hurt on a normal basis.
mine wasn't bad at all. I mean, it was just some chills and uh, kind of feeling down. Well, not down, but bad for a little while.
hmm
Like a head cold, basically.
hmm
And then when it went away, I found that I no longer could smell anything. And I was like, what? How?
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't even that bad.
Mm-hmm.
Which my brother actually had the same issue. He lost his sense of smell, and
Mm-hmm.
that that ended up almost being hazardous because he has, a gas stove that apparently leaked and he couldn't smell it.
And he didn't know it. Yeah.
Yeah, and thankfully it was caught by somebody that could smell.
Oh, okay, good.
They were like, "Oh shit, it smells like natural gas in here." And but yeah, I mean that would have been pretty bad, or could have been pretty bad. So turns out you need your sense of smell.
Yeah,
Detects hazards.
my brother lost his sense of smell as well, but that was a decade ago, and he got kicked by a horse. Um,
Oh, did it
completely
ever come
different.
back?
Um, kind of halfway,
Okay.
and not like
Mine's mostly back now,
yeah. Oh,
thankfully.
good. You think it's slowly returning or something?
Yeah, it's taken a long time, but it's on its way back. I'd say it's at like 80%, 2 years down the line.
Okay. All right. Did you kill the Reaper?
I did.
You did. Good job.
Yep, and
That's
then another
fantastic.
Reaper came and killed me.
Yeah, they just keep coming.
Uh,
it's
but
it's
I got an unlock. It wasn't the Reaper. I thought the Reaper unlocks when you kill the Reaper, but
mm,
guess not.
I thought so too. Maybe I'm
I unlocked some other guy.
okay. Ready to go over the news?
Yeah?
All right. I think I'm sharing my screen with you. I'm gonna switch over to my main screen here, and then bring up this. And since we're yeah, we'll start with
Nice.
old boy George Santos. The top donors, many don't seem to exist. So I don't. Yeah, where did the money come from? Who gave it to him? Why did they use fake names? Is it all his money under a dozen different names? I don't know.
Listen, I don't know why you're slandering Anthony DeVolder like this.
Yeah, maybe he's got lots of different names. Uh, George
He's
Santos,
apparently gone by several. So,
Victoria, and Jonathan Rigor had each contributed 2,800, which is the maximum amount to his first bid at House seat. Their listed address was 45 New Mexico Street in Jackson Township, New Jersey. Why are they paying for a guy in New York? All right. Uh, search of various databases reveals no one in the United States named Victor or Jonathan Rigor. No one. Moreover,
incredible.
there is nobody by any name living at 45 New Mexico Street in Jackson. The address doesn't exist. The address doesn't even exist. You can't even get like Google Map real addresses. Uh, then you've got another one, Stephen Berger. It just doesn't exist. It's amazing. Like under federal campaign finance law, it is illegal to donate money using a false name or in the name of someone else. So he might have actually broken the law here.
The legend grows.
It's only getting bigger. Tonight, this evening, I will ask him how and what and why, and maybe he'll let us know. What does the House, what does the Speaker of the House do about this? What do you think he should
I
do?
don't know if this is a thing that has any sort of precedent to it.
Right. I think this
Um,
is wholly new. This is beyond what has happened in the past.
I think that most likely he ends up getting charged. I mean, if this is the case, if he broke campaign finance law, then he probably gets charged and removed, and then there's a special election held to replace him. If they don't find that there has been a crime, then he probably just gets to stay for the next 2 years.
Hmm. I should probably look up the rules. A lot of places
Well,
have,
wait, it is two, right?
Yeah, it's two
Yeah.
years. Yeah, it's 2 years.
Okay.
That's why most of them
The
don't
Senate's
have.
6.
That's why most of them don't have special elections for House because it's 2 years. It takes a year to put together a special election. Why bother? Um, if
They would
and
in this case because they can't afford to lose basically a single member of the
I
House. The
might.
the margin's so thin.
I know it is very thin. So the Speaker of the House, who is a Republican, doesn't want to lose a Republican vote. That makes sense. I understand that. I think in some cases, if it were a different circumstance and he just died, his plane crashed and he died, I think the governor of the state gets to appoint the next person. Sometimes that happens. Uh, I'm pretty sure New York has a Democrat governor, so they wouldn't put
Yeah,
in
so
a
they wouldn't
Republican,
go that
and
route.
then and then the House doesn't want that to happen. But that means it's more likely that he stays if uh, if Mr. McCarthy there at Speaker of the House is looking at losing a Republican vote or getting rid of this guy. I think he keeps him and just doesn't give him
Definite
any.
possibility.
Yeah, that is. But then we get to keep talking about him, and I get to keep interviewing him. It hasn't happened yet. Later tonight, hopefully, and then I'll publish the video tomorrow morning or something like that after I edit it, because editing is hard. Uh, moving on. I'm a Florida teacher who's been forced to cover up books in my classroom. Here's why I'm suing Ron DeSantis. Uh, this because of the well, we talked about it a couple of times before, but schools are telling teachers to take books off the shelf so that they don't run afoul of the governor's new law. New law in Florida requires all books in public schools be vetted for children, and they're going very, very safe. The school does not want to get sued by the parents, so they are harshly limiting what's going to be in there. High school social studies teacher Don Falls says he covered up his books to comply with the law. He's covering them up. I think he's just trying to skirt the law, um, so that the kids can't see them. But if they want, they can go get them. I don't know. And there is another teacher who's just taken the books off the shelf completely.
Well, that's an act of protest, isn't it?
No, like if that book stays, a parent of the students could sue the school. And if they sue the school then has to pay for legal representation. And if 10 uh, parents sue the school, then they have to do even more. Uh, they have to hire even more lawyers, and it costs even more. And now their school is even more broke than they already were. So
Well,
they're going to the extreme.
if 10 parents sue the school, it usually will get bundled into a class action lawsuit.
Well, sure. And and if each one of them expects to be compensated or something like that, if they win the case, then they will have to pay restitution and shit like that. And it's just this was the plan from Ron DeSantis. This was what he wanted, is what I'm getting at. I'm going full political and saying this is exactly what he wanted.
I don't think so. I think the books taken off shelves will probably be vetted and then put back on the shelves.
Or not. And if they're not, if the school says, hey, we run a razor thin margin already, do not put anything, do not put these hundreds of books back on the shelf.
Then we'll see what happens. I mean, if they don't, then most likely the next thing that gets complained about is that there's no books on the shelves, and then that comes back on DeSantis.
Mm.
So he's playing a dangerous game here,
I
but
don't. I don't think it does come
I don't
back
think
on.
that happens. I think the schools vet the books go back on the shelves.
Um, the teacher says it's all fabricated. The wokeism isn't being taught. Uh, And I think we're a step away from book burning, honestly. Because what do you before you burn all the books, you have to gather them up and put them in a pile. We're starting the book gathering right now.
No, I mean, he already has said that some of his books have been vetted and approved. Like literally two paragraphs above where you're at right now.
Mm-hmm.
They have a database.
If it happens to be a
Some
book that
books have
has,
gone through the process. If it hasn't been vetted or approved, then you can't give it.
mm-hmm.
But then the solution then is just get them vetted.
Get them.
Yeah,
So you have to
put them
have
through the system.
state approved books.
It's a public school.
It's a public school, and
Everything in there is state approved.
right. Well, okay. They didn't have to be before. Uh, and I don't trust the guy who wants to ban books for wokeism to put people in place in the Board of Education to vet those books.
Hmm.
He's seeming very fashy to me, and this seems like we're getting ready for a book burning, and he will put fashy people in charge of the Department of Education. They will only allow the books they want that agree with their politics, that agree with their ideology. And I bet the Bible passes that vetting. I bet it does. That's what I would do if I was this guy. I would uh, uh, give the Bible to the vetting uh, people, and then when it gets approved, take that to the news.
There is no student that's going to read the Bible anyway.
No, but if that passes, no, if that passes, it proves that they aren't actually reading and they're just uh, choosing politics. That's the thing that kills me is Ron DeSantis says that the books that he doesn't like are political, but the books he does like are not political. It's 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 obvious that they are.
You think the Bible's a political book?
Yes, at the moment it is. I think
It's a religious book.
it's a religious book that is used by political people to get what they want.
Sure, but that doesn't make the Bible political.
Everything's political. Literally everything. Everywhere. Ever. For eternity.
I mean,
All the things.
if you go that expansive, sure, but
Right.
I disagree.
I
I
am
think
being
that we
that
can
judge, yeah.
remove politics from a lot of things and still be just fine.
I can't imagine how. George Washington won an election. That's politics. He beat somebody. He ran on a platform. He promised certain things. The other guy promised different things, and then, well, I don't think he. I think he might not have won an election. Second president won an election. All the
There you
presidents
go.
won elections.
I
I
was going
think
to say, I'm pretty
they
sure
then they
Washington
just
was
appoint him.
unanimous
He
after
was unanimously
winning against
appointed.
the
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
the British.
that's pretty political, isn't it? Hey, we want freedom, and he fought against a government. Very political. That George Washington guy. He fought
Sure.
and killed another government's army. Oh my goodness. Very political. Everything is. Everything about history is political. The entire Civil War, politics. Um,
What I'm
the
saying is, sure, history can be political, and politics is, of course, political, elections and whatnot,
mhm,
but our media doesn't have to be. I mean, we discussed this already. Like, the Bible's a book.
mhm,
It's a form of media,
mhm,
right? Doesn't
mhm.
You don't have to make it political. It's a religious book.
It's a religious book that's filled with stories suggesting how you ought to act. It's
Yeah.
a morality guide at best. At worst, it's just a confused genealogy. But at best, it's a guide to morality. And what is politics? Morality is
Politics
leads you
flows
to
from the
from
morality,
morality, right? So I
right?
mean, you've
Not the other way around. So
right. I
if
agree.
nothing else, the Bible is a first order book, whereas the political stuff is second order
I'd say actually third.
or
Morality,
third. Yeah.
yeah, leads to ethics. Ethics, if you want to apply your ethics, you need politics. Politics are applied ethics, if you follow my idea here.
Yeah.
And then
I follow.
ethics come from morality. Um,
So that's why I would say that the Bible's not political. It's a religious book. You can take ideas from it and then turn those ideas political, but that's not the same thing.
hmm. What if you gas a bunch of protesters and then hold it up?
You're not gonna do the Trump thing. Don't do it.
Okay, all right. Does it become political then? So it's a political tool if
Somebody used
if you
it
use
as a
it as a
political
political
tool.
tool. Okay, great.
Sure.
Okay. Do you think it would pass the vetting
That
in
really
Florida?
depends.
I
I
bet it
mean,
would. I
I don't
bet it
know.
would.
The Old Testament, uh, is a little bit,
Oh, I bet the person
um,
who puts it up for vetting hasn't read it, and the person who vets it hasn't read it, and the governor hasn't read it. They don't know what's in it. They just know it's good, so they will give it a thumbs up and say it's good. It's fine.
I think the real question would be, or the real gotcha would be, is for somebody to have the Bible and the Quran vetted next to each other.
Oh,
And
that's
then
not a
if one
gotcha
of
at
them gets
all.
approved and one of them doesn't, then you have a an argument.
No, that's a huge boon to Ron DeSantis. He will get so many more Florida voters that way.
He doesn't want just Florida voters, though.
I know, but he will get all of the Republican voters after that because he's outlawed the Koran. He's put it through a fair and balanced test and found that it isn't good enough. And he will, I mean, that's a giant stunt, and from a guy who does a lot of political stunts. And
Well,
I
no,
think he would benefit from that.
what I'm saying is the Bible would only really be able to make it through on the grounds that it's a religious text,
hmm
right? So putting another religious text through the system and having that one denied,
hmm
um, would be, I don't think that's a boon or to DeSantis at all. I think that that is one of those things that starts to turn people uh, more to your sort of thinking in terms of how this law is playing out, right? Like that's what I've been saying the whole time is like, hey, wait until we see how the law plays out, and we'll figure out, after the fact whether or not the law ended up being as doom and gloom as you've been saying, right?
Well, I mean, it's playing out right now. Uh, this teacher thinks it's necessary to take all the books off. And yeah, you're right
That's
that,
fine
and I
for
don't
now.
think you know enough Southern Baptists. Uh, if well, hypothetically, uh, Mr. DeSantis says, "Hey, run the Bible and the Quran through there," and the people he appointed shoot down the Quran and say yes to the Bible, he just won the state of Texas. He just did it.
But
They
he was
will.
always going to win the state of Texas.
I know, but they will come out for him even harder, and they will leave Trump behind. They will abandon Trump for that move
Great.
because he has just proven that the thing that they've based their entire lives on is correct. And they will take that as a sign and they will run headlines that Ron DeSantis banned the Koran in Florida. He can do it for Texas too if we just elect him. And that is what he will, that is a stunt that he will run on and win. If I were using it for a political stunt, I would just send in the Bible, and when gets approved, I would show it to, I don't know, people and say, hey, this book is okay. And it would convince, I would preach to the choir. Shit. Uh, People like me on the left who would say, hey, this is a bad book. You shouldn't approve it. It's religious. It shouldn't be in a public school. And that would just make people on the left dislike Ron DeSantis. Shit. That doesn't do any good, does it? The people on the left already don't like them, so I haven't done anything good. Um, uh, so yeah, this is yeah. I'm worried that this goes on and turns into actual like book collecting and book burning, stuff like that. That's just what I'm worried that we're headed towards.
Let's see.
Uh, but what can we do to make it better is bring back civics. I think that's a good idea. Education is always good, right? Um, buried in the
We
year
not
end.
had civics in
No,
schools?
no.
The fuck?
13 states have no civics course at all, requirement at all. Uh, for today's students,
See,
civics
you'd
is
think
more of
our
a password.
public education system would be teaching how, you know, our government works.
It ought to, but
I
it
got civics class
isn't.
growing up.
I got a
Um,
basic government class, and then I got what was it? One semester of government, and then one semester of economics. Both were taught by a football coach, but I'm from Texas, so everything is taught by a football coach. Um,
uh, no, I had an actual civics course,
uh-huh.
and then I had a American government course, and then I had and then of course there was social studies, and I
Mm-hmm.
had a U.S. history course as well.
Mm-hmm.
Each year I had something to do with either politics or how our government functions or history of some sort for um, the entirety of my high school. I think that teaching how our government works is uh, a necessity. I mean, for people to make an informed vote, it's kind of silly. 13 states, no civics course requirements. It's I wonder how much wordplay there is to that. Like, do
Mm,
they does the fact that they have no civics course, is that because they have an American government course instead, and they don't call it civics, um, and so this article is saying 13 states have no civics course requirement,
yeah,
but
requirement I
those
think is
13
important
states
there.
have. Yeah, I mean I'm sure they offer it, but
They probably
it's
offer a type of class that you're talking about, which is a government or something along those lines. But um, I think the word requirement there is important because the kids going that are trying to go to college aren't going to do the bare minimums in high school. So your people who are doing the bare minimums and not doing this class because it's not required are the people that need it the most.
yeah.
If you're knocking out AP classes in an attempt to go to college, you have you probably understand, or you're going to go to college where you can learn things like that. If you are doing just what's required to graduate high school, you're probably not on your way to college, honestly. Um, and then you don't go to college, and then you're the one who needs that civics course the most.
I don't know if the civics course is easy, then and you're trying to skate by, you're going to have a certain number of electives that are required for your school.
Mm-hmm.
In which case, you're taking civics. Uh,
Oh, I don't think it's gonna be easy and skate by. I mean, basic understanding of how the thing is. If they're 18, register them to vote. Give them the steps on registering to vote. You know.
but I will say I do think civics should be a standard course
Okay.
for at least 1 year.
Okay. So what should and shouldn't be taught in that civics class? Climate change, community violence, mental health, economic uncertainty, immigration. I don't know. What should and shouldn't be in there?
Well, structure of our government would be probably the biggest one,
Okay.
I think.
The
Um,
the branches,
from
how a bill becomes
from
law. Sure.
yep, the branches, how bills are passed,
The,
how or what the powers of each branch are, what their
mhm,
purpose is. Uh, you're also going to get into your state government, whatever the structure is there,
mhm,
um, the judicial system, the the ranking of the courts from your local court all the way up to the Supreme,
mhm.
the appeals process, maybe a little bit of law there, like understanding things like standing, for example.
Mm.
Um, all those things would be great. Uh, how to vote and where to find the information.
Mhm.
Um,
Do you agree?
probably get into a handful of um, precedents in terms of like major legislation or major court decisions
Okay.
and
Now,
discuss those.
now those court decisions had two sides. How do
Of
you?
course.
So is that does that make it political?
Well, I
One
think that
side is the government, one side is the people, or one side is one person against another person, or and you're going to have somebody saying, I mean, if it got to a Supreme Court, two people think they're right. So you
well,
have
yeah,
to.
and what I mean, a lot of what I've seen from civics courses is if you're going to talk about court decisions, then you could actually have people or your students.
Mhm,
You can assign them to a certain position on the course on the topic,
mhm,
right? And you can have them. They have to figure out what the uh, arguments are going to be, and then you have them argue the case.
mhm.
Which I mean, that could be political, but
And
I think it's relatively neutral in terms of the assignment itself. Uh,
and
you might
if
have one student that's really good at arguing one side and he wins, but that's or she wins, but that's you know, just how it goes.
and if that case had anything to do with race, would it not fall afoul of uh, the Florida law? There are plenty of cases about race and how we treat people, and I think that would slam right in the face of Florida's law about not making people feel like America discriminated or something along those lines. I think a
I
parent.
don't think I would touch those in the first place anyway, because I
So
wouldn't want to put a student in the position where they have to argue in favor
okay,
of discrimination.
so you don't put that book on the shelf. This is my
Well,
problem
I don't
with
put that case in the curriculum.
you don't put that case in the curriculum.
I mean, well,
Choosing
in
what to
terms of
put in and
students
what
having
not.
to argue it,
Right. I agree.
you could still
I
teach it.
understand. You could still teach it. Okay. Well, I this is the slippery slope that I think the Florida law is going to lead to, where if it is even a little bit controversial, they're just not going to teach it, which means it doesn't get known, which people don't know that it happened. And then there are, I think, kids that leave high school and go to college are ill-equipped because the colleges hopefully are going to be able to teach them what's real and what is more controversial. You know, but that again that leads to a two-tiered society, doesn't it? The uneducated who went through only what was required and have never heard any of these controversial things, and they're in low-wage jobs. They're auto mechanics doing manual labor, and then the people who went to college have a completely different understanding of the history of the country. And that leads them down different ethical paths. That give well, The college gives them some morals. They take it to the ethics, and then they go to politics, and they say, "Hey, our politics are wrong." But it's almost like Christopher Columbus. Um, you were taught about Christopher Columbus, yes?
Yeah.
So was I. Yet they don't teach that anymore. Why? Because some new evidence came out that he was a slaver and did some very terrible things. The man chopped hands off of people that didn't bring him gold, of indigenous people. That evidence was hidden by, I want to say, the Portuguese government, honestly, or a Spanish government. I don't remember, one or the other. Um, until like 2005, 2010, somewhere around there, is when they released that stuff, and we all read it and said, "Oh no, this is terrible. We should stop teaching about him." But my grandparents don't know that part. So the old people who are like, "No, we can't talk about Columbus anymore. No, we can't have Columbus Day anymore. No, we can't. We need to rename it to Indigenous Peoples Day from Columbus Day." Don't have that education. So it's created a schism between educated people knowing what history was and the uneducated people not knowing what history was.
Sure. I mean, but I don't understand the relevance. I mean, sure, maybe we don't celebrate Columbus, but he is credited with discovering the New World. So I guess really maybe we don't have a Columbus Day,
Okay.
but why would we not teach about the person that is credited with discovering the New World? I mean, we don't have to
You
lionize him. We don't have to make him a hero, but that
because
is part of history.
he was a hero until a few years ago when we decided, hey, this guy probably wasn't actually a hero. So that change, that swap, is what upsets people, and it creates a schism between two. I mean, there's two tiers of people in the country right now: those that were taught he's a hero and think he is, and that are taught later a better, different history and say he's not. Um, and I know it's a small problem, and nobody's gonna go to war over the past of Christopher Columbus, but they might go to war over racial issues. If you go through the basic high school and you're taught that MLK solved all the racism and now it's over, and then you go on with your life and you leave high school and you think that everything's great, and then you go and you're the auto mechanic who just finished high school and has a good job doing auto mechanic stuff and doesn't worry about this, you're going to vote a certain way based on the morality and ethics that you were taught. And if the kids from that same high school go to college and get a more realistic understanding and see him in a different light as a rabble rousing, uh, non peaceful protester, because some of the stuff they did wasn't super peaceful, um, it leads you down the road to different morality, different ethics, and then different politics. And that is one of the biggest divides I think we have in the country right now, is those two things, because we have different history, because our high schools are fucking up. They're just not teaching kids the right way.
So I wonder about what it is that you're trying to argue for. Like, is it you want the schools to be more political?
I want them to be free to teach. Yeah, I want them to teach freedom and be structured in a way that there isn't a giant divide between high school and college. Uh, I recognize that colleges are mostly private institutions that can choose to teach whatever the hell they want. I don't love the idea, but um, I recognize that that's the system. That's the way it probably has to be. Um, but what I would like is for high school to be a leveling up, sort of increase knowledge, increase knowledge until you get to a point where you can survive. And then if you want to go farther, you go into the college. What I don't think is a good idea is learning about Christopher Columbus, the hero, for 12 years, and then going to college and finding out that he was a slaver at chopped off hands. I don't think that's a good plan. I don't think that's a good model, is to go to college and change everything about what you've known. Because that's what the conservative parents are complaining about, isn't it? I sent my kid to school and came back a raging liberal. Well, that's because they're teaching completely different things than what's in the high school. If that raging liberal child had been taught these things softly in a decent way when they were in high school, they would have been raging liberal in high school.
I don't know about that.
Yeah,
Are you sure it's not because the
absolutely.
professors themselves aren't overwhelmingly left?
I think the professors themselves probably are overwhelmingly left.
Well, they are.
Yeah, that
There's studies on
is
it.
not a surprise because they've abandoned the sugar-coated, half-assed explanation that high schools were giving. The uh,
Nope. It's because the professors are those
educated
that can't do teach. You know.
because they're educated. I mean, education leads to liberalism. I mean, it does. Uh, the more you know, the more you learn, the more you pay attention, especially within school structures, you start to move left. Do you agree with this sentence right here? Essential civic knowledge is more than how government works. It requires nuanced understanding of how our country has evolved and an active exploration of current affairs that reflects diverse perspectives.
Essential civic knowledge is more than how government works. It's also history. Sure.
Okay. But if that history is an exploration of diverse perspectives, I think it'll be called woke, and I think it will be called critical race theory, and then Florida won't teach it. And the Florida school that does gets sued.
I disagree. I think that teaching history accurately
Mm-hmm.
is something that is not could not possibly be called critical race theory.
Okay.
I mean, we there's no way that Florida schools are going to stop teaching the fact of slavery, right?
They would like to. I think they want to stop teaching it, yes. I think they want to gloss over it as slavery was some bad thing that America fixed. And I think if you, and I don't know that I've ever heard anybody actually suggest it, but like, America solved slavery, hooray, go America. If you frame it wrong, it is wrong. I don't know what I'm going for here. Um,
I don't either.
Neither do I. I've lost the thread. I think they want to control what history gets taught. I think the high schools are more conservative, and the colleges are more liberal. And so the conservative parents that I mentioned earlier that are upset that their uh, child's a liberal is because they've indoctrinated them for 12 years in this is how the government is. This is how we're not the government. This is how the world is. Here's how history works. And then they go off to college where they're not supervised by their parents anymore and not under the control of this conservative K through 12 system. And they're taught a completely different world. They're taught a completely different history of everything. A completely different way to look at all these things. And that's why they come back and they're a raging liberal now. I don't think it's the professors that are doing that. I think it's literally history.
I think it's the professors and most likely sort of a pervasive culture at this point
Okay.
that has spawned from that.
I
But
think it.
there's no real way of
Yeah.
proving either one of our perspectives.
I think the active exploration of diverse perspectives is what does that. And this is, if this is what civics is, an active exploration of diverse perspectives, it will be challenged by the people of Florida. It will be challenged by conservative lawmakers.
Well, you I think that a part something that's missing from schooling these days is the ability to discern truth from fiction, right? I mean, we don't really teach that
That's
ability. It's
that's
we
media
teach people
literacy. You know, how do you
we what we teach people is to trust authority at every turn.
how do
Uh,
you teach that when Marjorie Taylor Greene talks about Jewish space lasers?
Talks about what?
Jewish space lasers. Um, how do you teach that when old Maytag here is saying that Donald Trump won the election? How do you teach media literacy? How do you teach people to know what's true and not without being political? I don't think you can.
Teach people to use their critical thinking skills. Teach them to do research. I mean,
Hmm.
teach them to not trust everything that comes out of the mouth of an authority figure.
Okay, and then the school gets, and then Marjorie Taylor Greene is literally a liar, and we call her that in the school. I mean, we would just have to get to the point where this person is lying. She is also a Republican. Hence, what you just explained is political. And then the school gets sued in Florida. Here's what's true, here's what's not. Let's apply the framework.
I don't think you'd have to use contemporary political events to do that. I think you could use historical events. You could even go so far as to not even include American politics in your exploration of discerning truth from fiction. I mean, you could use Soviet propaganda, for example, right?
Okay.
I mean, you can show people how it's possible for politicians and media figures to lie about things, and you can teach people to look for alternative explanations for things that otherwise they would just trust somebody on.
That sounds very political.
You can do it without getting engaged in contemporary politics,
Without getting into contemporary politics. Okay.
which is gonna would that right there is what would end up triggering some kind of backlash that the schools are being political, right?
The
If you
the
get into
contemporary stuff definitely would.
talking,
Yes.
yes,
I
the
know it was.
contemporary stuff, but you can teach that stuff. There's enough history, there's enough examples to where you don't have to get into what Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying today in order to
Okay.
teach people not to trust everything that comes out of the mouth of somebody that got elected to the House of Representatives.
Okay. How far back can we go? Can we talk about Reagan? Can the school teach? Here's what happened. Here's what Reagan said. Here's what happened. I mean, the Iran Contra deal. That was a big ass deal, and there was a lot of lying on a lot of sides. Is that open, or do we have to
I
go
think it
back even
depends
further?
on the situation.
Okay. In 2023, I almost said 22. In 23, are we allowed to talk about things that happened in the 80s, or do we have to go back to where nobody was alive?
It's a good question.
Because
It's one I'd have to give a lot of thought to.
yeah,
But
I don't know the answer either. Do I want a high school teacher going over Maytag's tweets? No, I don't want them. I was being extreme when I mentioned it, but I think that if you do the thing that you suggested in telling people what to find, what's true and what's not, it's gonna end up being political, and the parents are going to hear that uh, Billy went to school and learned that Reagan lied about the Iran Contra deal, and they're going to flip their shit, and then they're going to sue the school. Which is why, again, I know I'm bringing it all the way back. That's why DeSantis put that law in to begin with. He wants to scare the schools into not teaching controversial things. He wants them to be very dull, very bland. Here's your math. Here's your basic science. Don't go into environmentalism or climate science. We're going to avoid those, even though they're science. Um, and in scaring them out of teaching things, his population is now less informed, less intelligent, and more likely to vote for him.
Well, I do think that there is some merit to the idea that we should be avoiding politics in public schools.
Mhm.
Um, for me, the purpose of our public school system is to generate functional members of society who are prepared to join the workforce upon entering adulthood. So, part of that functional member of society is, of course, knowing how our government works and, voting. But beyond that, um, our educational system's primary purpose, I think, is to make somebody, or is to create somebody who is fit for the workforce. So I do think we should have a civics class, and we should be teaching history.
Okay.
We should have uh, our core classes. We should probably have a mandatory class uh, on paying your taxes, for example, and setting budgets. So
Mhm. That was part of
like a personal finance type class.
yeah, that was part of my economics class. It was checkbooks. Here's how your taxes work. Not really taxes, but like here's what a W-2 is. Um, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and how to file and all that stuff. And
Mhm.
then we should have, I think personally that after that we should probably be moving on to, like, you could probably get that stuff in less than 4 years, and last year or two of school should be a dedicated, like, learning of a profession, unless your track is to go to college, at
Mhm.
which point the last 2 years of high school would be to build on that information in order to send you to college. But I think that getting too political with education in the first place is detrimental to the primary purpose of it,
Okay.
which is, I think, to create a functional member of society.
Okay. And anybody who's too into politics is not a functional member of society. I agree with what you're implying there. I am not, in fact, functional. Uh,
Well,
I'm
that's not
far.
what I said. I
I
mean,
know. I know you're not saying that. I'm joking. I'm taking your thing uh, in a way that's suggesting that I'm far too into politics to be functional. I'm too into politics to be functional. Um, you've just illuminated it for me. You weren't saying that to me, but you've shined some light on it in my head, and now I know that I am too political to function.
I would say you're possibly too political. I wouldn't say too political to function. I think you function just fine, buddy.
Okay.
You can
Um,
take that as a compliment from yours truly.
I appreciate it. Yeah. Um, okay. You know that I'm not real good on the economy. I think it's mostly imagination and emotion. But so tell me what Maytag is thinking here. She introduced a bill, got shot the hell down. Not even the Republicans wanted it. I think it would prevent us from selling oil to China. And I know that's a thing that you've spoken on about before. Um,
So,
limits the drawdown of petroleum in the Strategic Petroleum Reserve until the Department of Energy develops a plan to increase the percentage of federal lands leased for oil and gas production. Um, I think the China thing is later, but this is the basic idea of it, of her suggestion?
Well, I think that the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and I think I've actually argued that it's for national defense purposes,
Hmm.
but actually, most of it isn't actually. It is for economic purposes. So
Okay.
I will say that it has been used properly by the Biden administration.
Okay.
So I'll give them the dub
I
for that.
was I was going
Actually,
to ask you that because I don't know enough
um,
about it. I have
we
heard people
have
say
our
it's for defense as well, but
we have a separate reserve for defense, and of course the SPR can be tapped for defense.
hmm.
Um, but it's not our primary reserve for defense. It has historically been used in an economic context.
Hmm.
When oil prices got ridiculous, the SPR was tapped into. And so, yeah, the thing is that what she's saying is that basically, if we don't produce more oil and gas,
Hmm.
then using our SPR is a band aid measure that is not going to fix. And this is a very, I don't like uh, Marjorie Taylor Greene
I know. Yeah, I know.
for reasons we've discussed.
Yeah.
Uh, but to give the most charitable interpretation here would be that if we don't increase our production,
Hmm.
then what we're looking at is we stop tapping the SPR, um, and we're already at levels lower than they've been in over half a century.
Hmm.
Uh, as soon as we stop doing that, that takes between 1 and 2 million barrels per day of oil off the market.
Hmm.
And what that does is it brings back exactly the problem that we started tapping the SPR for in the first place, which is a supply-demand imbalance, which results in really high oil prices.
Okay.
So what she is saying on this bill, I read some of it while it was on the screen here, or some of this article,
Hmm.
is that we would is that she wants us to be able to produce more oil
Hmm.
in order to keep the costs lower for longer, as opposed to continuing to draw down on the SPR until we just can't anymore.
Okay.
And that, that doesn't actually fix the underlying issue.
Okay.
Producing more will.
It will bring prices down. Yeah, and we will run out sooner, which I'm half on board for. Uh, sooner we run out, the better. Uh,
Hey, I got plenty of investments in oil and gas stocks, so if we run out of the SPR and prices go to $200 a barrel, then I'll be sitting pretty.
no, I mean like literally globally, we need to run out. We need to get off of this thing we're dependent on
Oh,
and
well, we'll never run
come
out
up
of
with
it.
better. Mm,
Um, we
mm,
we were supposed to hit peak oil like 30 years ago, and we never did.
peak
And the
oil is
reason is
just
because,
economic nonsense. There is an amount of this stuff, and it will run out someday.
well, someday, yes, and we are working on transitioning away from it.
Are we?
But yeah,
She,
I mean,
old Maytag screams bloody murder about the Green New Deal every 5 minutes.
that's fine. I don't really even remember what was in the Green New Deal.
I know,
So,
but
you
anytime,
know, whatever.
hey, let's get away from oil. You're part of the Module. You are now part of the Green New Deal. I'm sorry. You just said, hey, we're trying to transition. So you
We are.
are you no, you're part of the Green New Deal now. I'm sorry. You're part of it. You are,
I am in favor
and
of
Maytag is going
the
to
care.
cancel you. I mean, she's going to cancel
See,
you.
no, I think that if you asked Maytag if she was okay with expanding our development and research, or R&D into, or our grants for that stuff into like solar technology and whatnot, she probably would go for it.
I think she'd call it Green New Deal, and
I mean,
Thought terminating cliche. She's going to terminate that thought. Green
I
New
would
Deal. Get
certainly
out
be
of
in
here.
favor of expanding our R&D for green technologies,
I
and
agree.
especially for I think my preference, like as technology stands at the moment, my preference would be to invest substantially in nuclear power.
Hmm. I agree. It's
I
the
think
left
that
that doesn't like that so much. It's the Democrats that don't like that so much. I know. Both sides are kicking us in the ass. All
I
right.
think that nuclear power is something that we've allowed um, scare tactics to keep us away from.
Hmm.
Uh, but we probably, given several $billion of funding and in about 10 years, we could probably transition most of the U.S. power grid uh, to being powered by nuclear, as opposed to fossil fuels, as
Hmm.
it currently is.
Hmm.
Um, I also agree with reforestation,
Okay.
and
I know
assuming that
that.
we can get the nuclear plants going, then I would be also in favor of finding some way to stimulate the transition to electric vehicles.
Hmm.
But none of these things are punitive against oil, and then none of those things prevent our production of oil while we still need it. So that's where I'm at. I've been
Okay.
in this position for many years now,
Yeah.
where I'm in favor of moving us in a certain direction
Hmm.
with positive incentive
Hmm.
and research.
Hmm.
I'm not in favor of tanking our economy, of restricting our own production of currently vital resources, um, which really only makes us dependent on external supply
Hmm.
in order to make that transition. I don't believe in that. I think that we should be continuing to produce. We should be continuing to. Um, we shouldn't be punishing the companies that are producing these resources, that are extracting them from the ground,
Hmm.
because we want to make a green transition. We should be making the green transition while also not making life difficult for Americans.
It sounds like a good idea, and I'm have nothing to argue against you at the moment. I don't think there's anything wrong with what you said. I think it's a fine idea, and I think it's the right way to go. But I don't think the oil company would allow it. I think they will hire lobbyists who then support Maytag. Then they're gonna hire lobbyists that go
Well,
against the plans that you just laid, because they would make less profit in the long run. If you hurt an oil company's profits by suggesting solar, I mean, didn't Ronald Reagan put or Jimmy Carter put solar panels on the White House, and then Ronald Reagan took them off because that uh, oil company paid him to or pressured him to?
I mean, sure, the lobbying is never going to stop from any direction, um, but oil companies make less money when oil prices are lower, and oil companies are not a monolith. They compete with one another.
Hmm.
So what she is saying is that she wants to cap the SPR drawdowns until such time as, what was it, they allow expanded drilling on federal lands.
Hmm.
Excuse me. Which that expanded drilling would increase production and would allow for lower prices, which
Hmm.
actually reduces the power of your major oil companies. Because it's not the major companies, or not all just the major companies that will expand into those lands. It's also small and mid-sized companies that will do that.
Hmm.
They will compete with each other. So I would say that lower oil prices are generally a benefit to our economy.
Hmm.
When our economy is doing well, we get more revenues in terms of taxes.
Hmm.
Um, and we have the opportunity to move towards more green energy than we do when we are following our current path, which is to restrict as much oil production as possible, to um, impose punitive like damages basically against companies for producing. Um, yeah, I'm a big fan of the carrot and not so much of the stick.
Okay. What about climate change? If those prices go down and the use goes up, that increases the carbon in the air. That increases the likelihood of disastrous climate change. If there's a stick, that's why. I know you don't like that stick, but that stick might be stopping the oil companies from pushing us over the cliff.
Well,
You're calling it a stick, but I'm calling it a guardrail at the edge of a cliff. It's
I
made out of
don't.
wood and it's a stick, and if you and they're running into it is from my position anyway.
I think that the first question to be asked is, even if we halted our oil production entirely,
Hmm.
how much does that actually impact climate change? And how much does that harm the ability for us to develop new technologies in the meantime? Because the stick harms our economy.
Hmm.
We need our economy in order to continue to develop things. And
Yeah,
also, the primary driver of increasing um, carbon in the atmosphere, of the increasing greenhouse gas, is not the United States.
I know. We did all our
So,
uh, industrializing in the 1900s, back in the
yeah,
1910s
it's
and the 1920s. That's when
most
we
most
built
of
all
the
our stuff.
growth in carbon emissions is from developing countries.
Right. Because when we did it, nobody was counting those things. So I mean,
But if those countries develop,
hmm
which they're going to need oil to do,
hmm
then presumably their own consumption will also fall
hmm
as they also start to make green transitions, right?
hopefully, yeah. That's best case scenario is that, I mean, yeah, best case scenario is that we don't tank the entire market. Because I wouldn't suggest, I'm not suggesting we stop all oil today. I'm just suggesting that intelligent people need to be elected to make decent and intelligent plans. We're not getting that anymore. We don't have well measured, intelligent people leading the country anymore. We have
Well,
extremists. I know there are extremists on the left as well, but an extremist on the left would say stop oil, all the oil right now, and let the economy be damned, and I wouldn't follow that extreme either. Um, it's like we need nuance and uh, not middle of the road, but uh, compromise. We need nuance and compromise, and that ain't the name of the game anymore.
I'll say this. The price of energy, which we primarily still get from fossil fuels,
Hmm.
is a primary driver of inflation.
Okay.
Now, our consumer price index has been dropping on a year-over-year basis lately. So earlier in the year, it actually came close to 8% increase year over year. I think the last print had us down below a 7% increase, but
Hmm.
don't quote me on those numbers. I'm
Okay.
just going off memory.
Hmm.
Now, that doesn't mean that prices are coming down. They're still going up, but it's the rate of change that has been coming down.
Okay.
Um, so and what I mean by that is like, say in August, if our consumer price index was 7.5%, it means that all the stuff that's accounted for in the CPI,
Hmm.
uh, the previous August was is now 7.5% more expensive, right?
Okay.
Whereas in December, if it was 6.5%, then that means that the previous December we're only 6.5% more expensive in December than we were the previous December, as opposed to the 7.5% more expensive in August than the previous August.
Hmm.
But the thing is that the previous August was also, let's say, 2 or 3% more expensive than the previous August before that, right?
Okay.
So we have a continued inflation that's going on,
Hmm.
but it's the rate at which that needs to be controlled. Now,
Because
energy prices are accounted for in the CPI, but I don't believe that they're part of core CPI. However, the things that are a part of core CPI are all influenced by energy because you have, in order to deliver goods, you have to be able to transport them, right?
hmm
In order to grow wheat, you generally need fertilizer. What's a primary ingredient of fertilizer? Natural gas.
hmm
You know, all these energy prices are baked into our consumer price index.
hmm
In order to control inflation, we have our Federal Reserve, and our Federal Reserve has to increase the federal funds rate. So if the federal funds rate continues to get increased, that's what's been stagnating our economy lately because you increase the federal funds rate. The federal funds rate is essentially the risk-free rate for taking out or for giving a loan, right? So if the rate is 4%, then that's 4%. If you invest in that, it's essentially like buying a bond. Um,
This
then
is
the
where
risk-free rate is 4%.
this is where I start to
Right?
say it's all imaginary and emotional.
Well, every bank that's going to give a loan is never going to give a loan at less than 4% interest at that point. Because if the risk-free rate, the chance that there's a default on the loan is 4%, right? There's a 0% chance, or if there is any chance that the government defaults on a loan, then we're all fucked anyway.
Hmm.
Um, but if the risk-free rate is 4%, then there's no bank that will give less than 4% on a loan, on on a AAA loan, right? And then you get into the lower rated ones, and you're talking about 6%, 7%, 8% type interest rates
Hmm.
on more risky loans. As you get into the B's and the C's, right?
Hmm.
Um, that is where the slowdown in the economy comes from. Is if money gets more expensive to borrow, then there is going to be less money flowing through the economy.
Okay. Um,
So, in order to combat inflation, the Fed increases the federal funds rate.
by
And
their best guesses, now we're in uh, trusting economists, and I don't trust economists. But I suspect that they're going to just do what's best for themselves.
well,
And if we're lucky, what's best for them is what's best for everybody.
you would hope.
I
Well,
I don't know if it
it isn't
is.
always.
It isn't always. What's best for the environment isn't what's best for the oil company. So they are acting in their own self-interest. They're an oil company. This is what they do.
Yes, everyone acts in their own self-interest.
Great. Well, then we've got those people in charge of a complicated economic system that seems to me to be based on feelings, guesses, and um, their own imagination. And that's why I don't trust economics. I mean, I know there's a lot of numbers and math and science involved here,
Economics
but
has always sort of been a matter of feelings
I know, and
and placing value in certain things that
I know.
might not necessarily have that value. I mean, even back when we were we weren't in a fiat system like we are now,
Hmm.
uh, the dollar was backed by an ounce of gold,
Hmm.
right? $1 was 1 ounce of gold.
Hmm.
Well, what's the real value of an ounce of gold? I mean, it doesn't actually do
Oh,
anything. It's not as
I
good of a conductor as copper.
I agree completely.
I mean,
You
it's a
can't you can't eat
it's
it.
yeah, you
You
can't eat it.
you
It's
can't
not a
turn it into
bullet.
a weapon.
You know,
You can't turn
it's
it into a plow. You cannot uh, do very much of anything with it with the
exactly. Does
gold.
gold have its uses? Yes. Does it? I mean, is it primarily used for those uses?
Hmm.
No. Uh, the fact that it's a precious metal, the rarity of it,
Hmm.
is what gives it its value.
It's
Um,
shiny.
but
Yeah.
but the fact is that before the dollar, we used like actual gold in trade.
Right, because it was
You know,
hard to get. It was hard to come by, and it was easily worked.
yeah.
So you could work it into coins and stuff like that. And it
So
was
so
hard to find.
currency has always been a matter of placing value in things.
I know.
Um, and then everything else built on that is yeah, it's largely um, theoretical,
I know, and the
right?
entire
But
civilization is built on it.
understanding, yeah, it is. So understanding it, understanding
Is
how it functions,
understanding
is
what's
kind of important.
yes, it is, but it gets there. It gets to a point where the people at the Fed, I don't trust them, because they're wrong a lot. Aren't they wrong often? Pretty often, they do things go wrong, things they didn't see coming happen. I recognize that sometimes you don't see the storm coming, and then it hits you and it hurts. But
Well, yeah, for example, the during COVID, when COVID hit, the Fed turned the money printer on,
right, nobody saw that
right?
coming. They did what they thought
Nobody,
was best, but it was wrong.
right?
Yeah. Would you say that it
Um,
was the wrong thing to do?
well, we really had two options at the time. It was allow the economy to tank and put millions into poverty,
Hmm.
or turn the money printer on and hope for the best.
Hmm.
And so they turned the money printer on. I'd say that the consequence of turning the money printer on is we now have the runaway inflation that we're looking at.
Hmm.
But the inflation is starting to come down. I think actually the Fed has done a reasonably good job this time around in uh, attempting their so-called soft landing
Hmm.
for our economy.
Hmm. Okay.
They've been helped in the last few months by oil prices coming down. They were at $120 a barrel this summer.
Hmm.
They're down to 80 now. Uh, so that's been a benefit.
Okay. Well,
Um,
I agree with you.
the
They shouldn't have turned the money printer on. They should have taxed the rich and given it to the poor. But that's my position anyway. It's always my position.
well,
Uh, but they turned the money printer on instead, and then gave that to everybody. Um, all right. Um, as usual, I don't quite get it. But we were talking about Maytag. What else we got? Anything
anyway,
else?
well, what I was talking
Yeah, okay,
about
okay, yeah, sorry. Good.
was that because oil is such a driver of the consumer price index, the Fed has to, and the Fed wants to bring inflation down. Increasing that federal funds rate is going to reduce the amount of money flowing through the economy, which naturally is going to cause potentially a recession,
Hmm.
right? So, in order to prevent that from happening, we would want our oil prices down so that the Fed can reasonably pivot off of their increases in rates,
Hmm.
which they've increased just about every month, the federal funds rate. Um, I think there were several months in a row where they increased it by 75 basis points, which is 0.75%.
Hmm.
Um, and the consensus for this month, because our CPI has been cooling down so much, I think the consensus is now that they're only going to raise it by, it's either 25 or 50 basis points instead of 75, right? So their rate of increasing the federal funds rate is slowing down.
Hmm.
If oil goes way back up, we're going to see a really hot CPI print. And that hot CPI print will cause the Fed to increase rates faster again, which is harmful to the economy in general.
Okay.
So we want low oil prices. And in order to get that, we have to have a supply and demand balance.
Okay. I can agree with those things. I just worry how we deal with climate change, which is why I want the oil to run out, so that we'll come up with something better. Necessity
Well,
being the mother of
as
invention.
far as climate change goes, either we deal with it or
Well,
the world is fucked. So,
I mean, one of the first steps in dealing with it is cutting the use of fossil fuels, um, which you've given a plan for, and I agree. It's fine. Let's make careful decisions based on facts and reality, but we can't because Maytag's in charge. Um,
just put me in charge. I'll fix everything. It's okay.
that's fine. I'd vote for you before I vote for Maytag. That's for sure.
I should certainly hope so.
Yeah, you're way above her on the list. Um, do you want to see her talk about Antifa?
Oh, Christ. Sure.
Okay. Unmute. Tell me how the
Taylor Greene
volume works.
represents Georgia.
I don't hear it at all.
Congress. She joins us tonight. Congresswoman, this happened in your state. I'm just amazed by how little we know.
The stream does.
There's this militia that kind of floats around America, and when needed, they show up and start burning buildings and flipping over
pull
police
up the
cars,
same
and
video.
No one knows who they are or who's paying for this. How can that be?
What's it called? Marjorie Taylor Greene, Antifa ground troops.
Yeah.
You laid it out just
All right.
perfectly, and I think honestly,
Where are you at on the
America's sick and tired
time?
I'm about 24, but go ahead and start.
24 seconds in.
Mm-hmm.
of Antifa. Look at what they've done over years now. Just from 2020, they're responsible for nearly $2 billion in damage and many people dead. But the war is against the police, and the reason why is because Antifa is the ground troops of the Democrat Party. Not only are they the ground troops, they breed them, they raise them, and then they bail them out of jail when they get arrested. But they never get prosecuted. And that's because, well, we know the truth. It's the Democrats in control, and it's the establishment, and it's the unelected bureaucrats that make no apologies for their support of Antifa. Well, it's time to do something about Antifa, and that's why I'm going to introduce legislation to declare Antifa domestic terrorist, because they need to be taken apart. We need to investigate exactly who they are, who funds them, and then we need to make sure that whenever they come out and erupt in violence, attacking police officers and attacking businesses in cities like my city, in Atlanta in Georgia, we need to make sure that they're arrested and charged with domestic terrorism charges, just like the GBI did this past weekend. Enough of Antifa. They are not the anti-fascists. They are the fascists. And they always show up and they defend Democrat causes. Not only do they attack police, but they defend the drag queens, targeting our children with drag queen story time. They go after people when they're not vaccinated and demand they get vaccinated and wear masks during the so-called pandemic. But enough of Antifa. We've had it with them, and it's time to do something about it.
Yeah, that was kind of a tell, I would say.
So,
Yep.
make
Almost
them.
done with the clip.
Okay, sorry. I gotta fix that.
Yeah, I don't know why I can't hear it when you stream it on Discord, but it might be just be a Discord thing.
I think it is a Discord thing.
We'll probably have to coordinate our watching of videos.
No,
in the
I think
future.
I can fix it in OBS. I just haven't figured out how yet. Because I barely
Okay.
comprehend OBS. Sorry. Yeah, I need to do a better job on that. But yes, Antifa, she wants to declare them domestic terrorists, and how is she going to determine if somebody is Antifa? It's not a group. It's not a. I don't have an Antifa card, you know. Um, and even
Well,
it's an ideology. It's an idea. And if you
sure.
start saying that ideas are illegal, you're talking about thought crimes.
Well, no, these people are committing actual crimes.
If you spray paint that building, then you get charged for spray painting that building.
Sure, and if you blow up the car, you get charged for blowing up the car.
Great.
However,
However,
the fact is that they are doing that for political reasons,
yes,
which makes it by definition terrorism. Yes.
makes it by definition a protest.
No.
Was the
No,
Boston Tea Party terrorism?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Then was it a good thing? Were we happy about
violence? Hold on. The use of violence or threat of violence, especially against civilians in the pursuit of political goals, is terrorism.
I think that's a new definition. I think that definition has come about from authoritarians who don't want you to fight against them. I think Maytag there is calling them terrorists I think she would call Martin Luther King a terrorist. I think she would call the marches that happened in the South for civil rights terrorism because she doesn't want it. She doesn't like it because she is an authoritarian. She's the authority. You will do what she says. And if you protest, it's terrorism and a crime. I watched those videos. Yes, they're doing things that are crimes. But so was the Boston Tea Party. Our entire country was built on crimes against the government that they thought was unjust. And that's what those people are doing. Though Antifa and those people in those clips are fighting against a government that they don't respect anymore. And this is a sentiment that the right wing throws around all the time. The tree of liberty will be watered with the blood of tyrants, you know? Well, Maytag, you're a tyrant.
And to be clear, the terrorism aspect of the Boston Tea Party is different in some ways. For example, no one died or was even injured.
Okay. We had the gigantic summer of George Floyd protests, and very few people died. Some people died, but it was the largest protest movement the country had ever seen, and very few people died. I mean, I'd say per capita it was pretty good. Is what she's saying a good idea? If the person was at that protest right there and they spray painted the building, are they charged for spray painting the building or are they charged for being Antifa?
Probably for spray painting the building, because
Okay.
Spray painting the building is obviously a criminal act, but it's not a violent one, which doesn't make it terrorism. So it has to be violent.
Okay. And violence only works. It's only violent if there's a person involved. If it's against a person. Breaking a cop car and setting it on fire is or isn't violence?
That's an excellent question. I would say that probably is violence. I wouldn't say spray painting is, though.
Okay.
I would say, in the same way that there's a certain amount of violence or threat of violence involved with the Boston Tea Party folks going in, and they did threaten the guards of the ships in order to get to the tea, and then they did destroy the property by throwing it into the water,
Mhm.
uh, which is A, a threat of violence, and B, destruction of property, which is theoretically a violent act,
hmm
you could call that terrorism, yes,
Okay.
uh,
Uh,
by definition.
okay. Um,
So, and they did do it to pursue a political end, which was uh, to not be taxed, right? To change the tax code from the British.
mhm.
Um,
Well, that's why I hate that word, terrorism. It's the slippery slope that's been going on, right? That more and more things become terrorist. Anything that the government doesn't like just becomes terrorism. Um,
I think that burning buildings and cop cars and whatnot, those are violent acts and they are acts of terrorism. I think the individual that commits that crime should be charged with it. The problem is that in most of these cases, there are so many people out there
mhm,
that you're never going to catch the perpetrator.
mhm.
So you have an interesting, weird situation there. Like, do most people that are members, I say members, but yes, they are not a, they're a nebulous
Highly decentralized
group.
movement. Yeah.
Yeah, they're a nebulous uh, movement. Can you just say that anybody calls themselves Antifa? Because they're not really an organization.
Right.
That's correct. So it's hard to actually designate them. Um, I would say that anybody that goes to these protests is at those protests for a political goal,
Sure.
but the ones that commit the violent acts, I mean, there's no real membership unless you actually have an organization that has like membership rules and whatnot.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I don't understand how you can call something that's not an organization a terrorist organization, which is where I find fault in Marjorie Taylor Greene's uh, assessment there,
Okay. Yeah.
right?
If they're not organized,
If it's not an
then it's
organization,
not
you
an
can't call
organization.
it a terrorist organization. Yeah, like, I mean, they don't have a leader, they don't have any of that. It's nebulous.
Mhm,
So you can't designate it a terrorist organization.
mhm.
But if somebody who committed a crime, a violent crime, during one of those protests is caught, they should be charged with terrorism.
Okay. With terrorism. I don't like that word. Again, I think they're protesting. Um, I think if I think you
What
charge them.
good does an act of protest do to burn some, to destroy cars in a dealership's parking lot because you're mad that a black guy died by at the hands of police?
It harms the economy. That's the
It,
point,
it,
man.
it
That's
harms
the
somebody's
point.
livelihood.
What good does throwing a bunch of tea into the river do? It makes people pay attention. It proves that you are willing to, uh, you are not okay with the way that you're being governed. What good does a peaceful protest that nobody notices do? What good does a peaceful protest inside the protest zone do you? The government sets up a nice little protest zone. They put on the fences and they put in the porta potties and they put in the little thing. And you can go into the free speech protest zone. Nothing happens. Doesn't do any good. Doesn't accomplish anything. If Martin Luther King Jr. was marching within the protest zone, nothing would have changed. Doesn't do any good. You actually have to disrupt things. You actually have to cause mayhem. You have to cause damage. You have to cause uh, people to pay attention, and you have to make people think that there is a problem with. You have to suggest to people that there is a problem that you are not, that the protesters aren't going to accept any longer.
See where you're coming from?
If I mean, I don't write. I'm just taking what I mean, I'm not saying that you've said this as a conservative, but conservatives tell me that they have guns so that they can fight the oppressive government. Well, that guy used spray paint to fight the oppressive government, and Maytag hates it.
Those guys that say they have guns to fight the oppressive government intend, if it ever comes down to it, to actually shoot at agents of the government.
Right.
The guy with spray paint spray painted a corner store.
Yes. He is
That
far
is not the
less.
same thing.
I agree. He is with the spray paint is far less dangerous.
And I am saying that he should be charged with being with spray painting. And I already said that that's not a violent
Okay.
act.
Okay. But the guys with the hard right guys who are collecting guns to fight the government don't agree with the guy with the spray paint. Shouldn't they be on the same
And
side?
also,
Shouldn't they agree with each other?
well, hold on. And also, the guys with those guns haven't actually done anything.
Not yet. Not at the moment.
Whereas the actual act of committing a crime is what is necessary for you to be arrested for it.
I mean, they took over a bird sanctuary once
Weren't they arrested for that?
after a long,
They had like a long
drawn-out
standoff.
stand
I
down.
forget what it was
Right.
called, the Bundy Ranch, right?
Yeah, the Bundy guys. Yeah, they were
Yeah.
protesting the
And-
government with weapons, and they were protesting the government action. Now, let's imagine a person who completely agreed with Aben Bundy and his takeover of that bird sanctuary, and they thought that he was doing the right thing and fighting the government. Does that person that I just invented, agree with Antifa? Do they support that kid using spray paint on the building? No, they don't. They think he's Antifa, and they think he's a terrorist. Yet they're not terrorists. Eamon Bundy, not a terrorist. Kid on the street with spray paint is a terrorist. And the reason I'm pointing that out is because Maytag is a conservative. Those are conservative people. And they're against, they're pro authoritarianism. They're anti-Antifa, which makes them pro-fascism. Yes.
Sort of lost the thread of what you were trying to say.
Maybe rambly. Maytag is an authoritarian, whether she knows it or not.
Okay.
She's
Based on the fact that
fascist.
she wants to
make thought
label
crimes.
Antifa a
Thought
terrorist
crimes.
group.
Thought crimes. If you do that spray paint thing in an Antifa way, if you Antifa-ly spray paint, you get more punishment. You become a domestic terrorist. You are tried and prosecuted for holding thoughts and opinions. And I think it's highly.
I disagree with the characterization. I think
You don't think
I
I'm
think that
characterizing it right? Okay.
I think that she fundamentally misunderstands what exactly Antifa is supposed to be.
I agree.
Which, I mean, if you think of it as an organization, then you could call it a terrorist organization because it has engaged in violent acts to achieve political goals.
Mhm.
However, the fact that it's not an organization means that you obviously can't label a terrorist organization against something that's not an organization. So
I think there's an entire.
her problem is that she has a fundamental misunderstanding of what Antifa is.
I think she fundamentally misunderstands the entire planet. I think there's an entire planet called Earth that she fundamentally doesn't understand.
That's fine.
And
That's, I mean,
why do I bring her up? I think she's going to be the vice president. I
Oh
think
God.
I think Trump, either Trump or whoever wins the primary, chooses her as their VP pick. Whether it's DeSantis or Trump, I think they choose her as vice president. And then what we have is a authoritarian leaning person who fundamentally doesn't understand most of the planet. And that
If
slides us closer to fascism.
if she gets picked as a vice president, it would be an insurance pick, I think.
Well, sure. Would it be a smart move for either one of those guys to pick her?
And only in the sense that nobody wants nobody at that point would want the president removed by any means because it means that she would be in charge. That's what I mean by an insurance pick. It's the same way that
Okay.
Trump, I think, picked Pence as an insurance pick because as much as people didn't, as much as the left hated Trump, they would they would hate Pence more.
Oh, I don't think they would. I would have preferred Pence.
I think that the funny thing is that Biden might have been an insurance pick for Obama,
That
and now
would,
he's our
yeah.
president.
Well, well, I don't think it was insurance. I think it was filling in your gaps. Hey, this Obama guy kind of light on the foreign policy
I
during
see.
the
So
during the
maybe that was supposed to be synergistic. I thought it was insurance because I didn't think Biden was electable as president until he became
barely got elected.
president.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he had a lot of
And
foreign policy expertise back then, and that was one of the biggest things that Hillary hit Obama on during the primary. Is you don't even know what our stance is on Libya. Like, how can you possibly be the president if you don't know what we're doing with Chechnya? You know, and to cover the things that he was missing, he chose Joe Biden, who the Democrats all said he had great foreign policy creds. Um, and covering things that you're missing, I think, is what Trump did with Pence as well. Pence was a standard Republican. I mean, if you had to build a Republican in a laboratory, it would be a lot like Mike Pence.
maybe I think that that Pence's evangelical side is what made him so unpalatable to the left and what made him a good insurance pick. I don't think that
Yeah, because he's stable.
that I
I,
don't think that Pence
the reason I said that
would
I
have
would
been a good. Go ahead.
oh, I was going to say the reason I would prefer him is because he's stable. I know what he's thinking. I know what he's going to do tomorrow. He's Trump is chaotic, stupid. He's chaotic and wild, and we do not know what he's going to do tomorrow. Pence,
I
we
think
can
that
see him coming from a mile away. But go ahead. Sorry.
a better choice for vice president for Trump, if he was looking for a certain synergy, would have not been to go for a governor. He should have gone for like an experienced senator as his vice president to fill in the gap where there is a lack of political deal-making knowledge, basically.
Okay.
You know, I think that if the vice president under Trump was some senator, and I don't know who, but somebody that has already built the relationships that are necessary in politics to get things done. That's what Trump lacked. Is he spent his entire term fighting his own party on getting things done. Whereas if you had a vice president that had been in the system, been friends with all these guys, and worked with them and voted with them, he might have gotten more done.
Oh, I bet that's kind of Mike Pence, isn't it?
I think that Mike
He was a
Pence,
governor.
as a
He wasn't
governor, it was not in
spending time in
the
D.C.
House of
I gotcha.
Congress all the time.
I
Right,
gotcha.
exactly.
Okay. Yeah, you're right.
That's where I think Trump failed the hardest in terms of his political gamesmanship. He didn't give himself any ins in order to get things done. He ended up fighting from the outside, like, basically the whole time.
Okay. Um, so this is why I was harping on Maytag. I think that the primaries happen, and either one of them would pick her because she is a ratings magnet. She would get all of that free press that Donald Trump got.
I wonder about if they will go with that strategy again, though. And by go with that strategy again, I mean they've tried it already. Back in 2008 with Sarah Palin.
They they thought, no, they didn't think she was this crazy. They didn't vet Sarah Palin. Nobody knew who she was before she walked out on that stage. She was, yes, governor of Alaska, but there's 17 people in Alaska. Sorry, Alaska. Um, Nobody knew who she was. I'd never heard her name before. And
But
I've been
Palin was a
watching the damn
ratings
thing.
magnet.
She was a ratings magnet, and so was Trump, and that got them the win. Um,
I think they picked Palin for two reasons. It's because, one, she's a woman,
mhm.
so you could try to get some of the female vote over
From
having
Hil-
the first woman vice president.
and
Yeah,
she was announced the day after Hillary lost the primary,
right.
and
And then
mhm,
you have that same angle for Marjorie Taylor Greene,
mhm.
although Kamala, you know, has already taken that thunder.
Mhm.
But also the fact that Marjorie Taylor Greene would be a ratings magnet, it'd be in very much the same way that Sarah Palin was, I think,
Mhm.
because Palin said some really dumb shit
Yeah,
on the campaign, and Marjorie would too.
yeah,
So
and it, Twitter didn't exist quite the way it did in what year was that? That was 2008. I mean, uh, all the politicians in the world weren't on Twitter putting out sound bites. I think MTG would be, or Maytag would be chosen for the ratings, and she would bring them in. She would bring the ratings in. She would bring the people. Everybody would look. Everybody would watch. I think that's what um, DeSantis is doing. Then why did he do the stunt with the immigrants? To get in the news, to get the ratings, to make people look at him, talk about him, and pay attention to him.
I think
He's,
Marjorie Taylor Greene would be disastrous as a pick for a candidate. If they make that pick, you should be celebrating because they'll fucking lose.
I don't know.
So
I
honestly, from my
yeah.
perspective, I definitely would never want to see her picked as the vice president because I would know that they're gonna fucking lose, and I don't want them to lose. So, I mean, Trump doesn't need the extra ratings, first of all, and DeSantis comes from a swing state, and he's well liked in that swing state. I think that they already have enough coverage that they don't need Marjorie Taylor Greene to get them that coverage. I think that the best bet for them, for Trump, would be to pick somebody that is a current senator, or maybe one that maybe just lost re-election or something like that, by a slim margin, hopefully, or a well, that's about it, or maybe one of the more experienced House of Representative members.
I don't know. An experienced person is going to stop Donald Trump from doing what he does. Stop him from being him. I think if DeSantis wins the primary, he picks Maytag as a stunt because he is running a stunt-based
And he'll
campaign,
lose.
and
That's
he
the problem,
might.
though.
I'm worried that he won't, honestly, because
I think the
it'll
best
be
option
against Joe Biden, who
I think the best
is
option for both of them is to pick somebody that's like a current senator, somebody that's well liked in the Senate, preferably somebody that's relatively moderate that has a track record of getting things done in a bipartisan fashion, which is going to be a very unpopular choice among Republicans. But who the fuck else are they going to vote for anyway if
I
the
know.
primary is already over?
I know.
So
Okay. Well,
that's my thinking.
Yeah, I'm just giving you my worst case scenario here. I
Trust me, Marjorie Taylor Greene as the vice president is my worst case scenario because the Republicans will lose.
What if they won? DeSantis Green wins. What happens?
And then our president has a great insurance policy.
Can't fight against the fascist because the one behind him is even worse.
I don't think I'd call either one of them fascist, but I think we have a disagreement on that.
That's fine. I will call Maytag a fascist. Um,
No,
and DeSantis is leaning that way, but we can talk about that at the time. We already went over and over and over and over again. Um, I don't know that they're doing it on purpose. I don't think Maytag's smart enough to know what a fascist or an anti-fascist is. She's just a big ball of emotion that sees a thing and hates it, or sees a thing and likes it, and then that's the thing that she likes is good and constitutional, and the things that she doesn't like are bad and Antifa and anti-constitutional. It's just I don't have much respect for her brain thinky parts. Um,
fine. I don't respect a lot of politicians' brain thinky parts.
I
So
I know. I think that's all I had for today. Whoa, what the heck is this? Oh, yeah, this is federal judge blocks California misinformation law because we're in the misinformation age, remember? Um, but this is only about. I clicked on it because I thought it was interesting, but it's only about doctors giving COVID-19 misinformation, disinformation to patients, which is weird.
found that it's too vague.
Yep, too
Okay.
vague, which makes sense. That's why they would uh, block it because it doesn't. I mean, how do you? What if there is a doctor telling you to inject bleach? I mean,
Right. Well, I mean, also, uh, the information has changed substantially
I know.
month to month. So, what a doctor tells you one month, the following month changes, and then now the doctor's getting sued
Hmm.
for providing misinformation. It's like, well,
Hmm.
last month this is what the consensus was.
Yeah,
Like, yeah,
it's not good and it's not easy, and being a doctor is very hard. So
yeah. I
I'm
think the scenario is too it changes too
yeah,
much over to call anything misinformation right now.
yeah, but that's part of the misinformation age. That's why we're stuck in the middle of it. Uh, so yeah, this was something I was like, oh my god, look at this, and then I read it and I was like, oh well, that makes sense. That's
Yeah,
fine. That's fine. There's nothing to worry about.
it's one of them headline grab things.
Yeah, I got grabbed by that one a little bit. All right.
Well,
Well,
next week we'll have to talk about Velma like we planned because I actually did sit down and subject myself to it.
I hadn't watched it. My kid was cruising around and I couldn't find the time to watch it. I will though. It comes out every week, right? So there should be 3 or 4 available.
There's 6 right now.
There's 6 right now. Okay. Well, I
I've
can.
watched 3.
Okay, I can knock those out. Um, I don't think I have any media stuff to talk about. What? I didn't watch anything good. I finished Willow on Disney Plus. It's a sequel to the Willow movie.
I don't think I've seen either.
Oh, okay. Well, Willow's an old 80s movie. It's not that good. Uh, uh, it's got a lot of. It's very 80s. If you want a lot of 80s, I mean, Val Kilmer. Like it's 80s as hell. Um, then it's got a Disney Plus sequel that's meh. So I wouldn't suggest it anyway. And it's got that Xena problem that you've got people wearing leather cuirasses and bronze equipment talking like they're at the mall in the 90s. Hey dude, how are you? Oh, I'm good. What's up? While wearing
Incredible. It's like they're
medieval
barbers.
equipment. Yeah, it's not that great. Uh, it's it's a thing that happened on Xena as well. So they've got that going for them. But sometimes I see it and I'm like, okay, why are you talking like that while wearing that? And it kind of, I don't know, I kind of like that they're not speaking in Old English, you know? I don't know. I mean, they haven't gone the Game of Thrones way where you just give everybody a British accent and a muddled or confused British accent, you know. So,
Yeah, I personally kind of like the Game of Thrones way because it sounds old timey, but then it also
right,
you understand what the fuck they're saying.
right, and you're used to it. Um,
Right.
I was reading about pirates, how they probably don't actually talk like that. They probably never did. And the talk like a pirate that we're used to, "Arr, me mate, serve me timbers and waffle my winky," yeah, all that stuff is made up by like a British actor in the early 1900s. He just
Neat.
invented it. He just invented it while he was playing a pirate, and everybody loved it, so they just stuck with it.
Works for me.
Yeah, and
Provides good entertainment.
yeah. Uh, all right, lunchtime. What are we doing? Oh, um, I will give you a message later tonight if George Santos calls me back, and he may want to put it off till tomorrow because I mean you know how he is. Uh, if you, I will when I get a time nailed down, I'll send you a message if you're available. I'll invite you on, and we'll. I don't think we'll stream it. I think we'll just make it into a video, and then I'll edit it and release it the next day. If he pushes it back until tomorrow, slippery little bastard that he is, I'll let you know about that too.
Sounds good, man.
Alrighty, and that is it for today. Do I have a couch phrase yet? I don't think I do. We'll experiment with different ones. Go read a book. Goodbye.